Here's a shout out just for you. This is for me, so it's for you. The shout out is for our friend Kim Spestic, I think it is, 59. It says, "Hi, my name is Kim. Love being outdoors, taking photographs, visiting places with her husband. She's got some very, very pretty pictures. So check out her channel, like, share, comment. Let her know that we sent you by, and have a good day." I don't see the red dot. All right, let's tell us something that's almost interesting.
Well, this almost interesting was actually provided by a commenter on a previous thread about battles. And this one here, he was mentioning the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. Basically, it was a classic, okay, let's be honest, a massive screw-up by the Roman Empire. At the time, Rome had pretty much had control of the southern parts of Europe. They were working their way up along the western side, along the Atlantic. And like every other great empire, they came across the body of water, the Rhine River. One of their biggest problems that they were having was that the people on the other side of the Rhine River, known as the Germanic tribes, were just not too thrilled with the idea of, being occupied by the Roman Empire. Now, interestingly enough, an alliance was formed by a guy named Arminius. Now, he was a Germanic officer who was actually given citizenship and received a Roman military education. This could be a bad thing, given that here's a guy who not only knows how Roman military officers think, but could also possibly be of use later on in campaigns. Now, going back to the original phase, the Teutoburg Forest is commonly seen as one of those important defeats in Roman history because it effectively wound up stopping a major expansion plan that Augustus had. Up to that point, they had gotten into Gaul, and Rome was trying to figure out which way to go next. What was interesting is Augustus had the idea of creating what they would call the Romanitas, which is an easy way for the empire to expand a peaceful way. Interestingly enough, those same people that he tried to turn into vassal kingdoms, like the Suebi, actually wound up later invading the empire in the 4th and 5th centuries later on. So, now, as we were talking with the attacks, let's go ahead and give you a time frame. A lot of stuff was going on back between 11 and 9 BC. Arminius, along with his brother Flavius, were sent to Rome as tribute by their father, Cimmerius the Conqueror, chieftain of the noblest houses of the tribe of the Cherusci. Arminius then spent his youth in Rome as a hostage, where he received a military education and was even given the rank of equestrian. Now, during his absence, Cimmerius was declared a coward by other Germanic chieftains because he had submitted to Roman rule, a crime punishable by death under Germanic law. Now, between 11 BC and 4 AD, hostility and suspicion among the allied Germanic peoples deepened. Trade and political accords between the warlords deteriorated. In 4 AD, the Roman general and later Emperor Tiberius entered Germania and subjugated the Canophates in Germania Interior, the Chatti in the upper Western River, and the Bacteri south of the Kalariski. After these conquests, he led his army across the Weser. Now, 2 years later, Legatus Gaius Sentus Saturninus and Consul Legatus Marcus Aemilius Lepidus led a massive army, 13 legions and their entourage, about 100,000 men. That's a lot of people back in that day, because you had 65,000 heavy infantry legionnaires, 10 to 20,000 cavalrymen, archers, and an extra 10 to 20,000 civilians against Maroboduus, the king of the Marcomanni, who were a tribe of the Suebi. Later, in 6 AD, leadership of the Roman force was turned over to a fellow known as Varus. Publius Quintilius Varus nobleman, experienced administrative official from a Petrarchan family, who is related to the imperial family. Now, he was assigned to consolidate the new province in Germania in the autumn of that year. Well, Tiberius was forced to turn his attention to Bellum Batanurium, also known as the Great Lyrian Revolt, which broke out down in the Balkans. This was led by Bato the Destate, Bato the Barakian, and Pinus of Pannonia, elements of the Marcomae. It lasted 4 years. So while they were trying to work in the northern parts of Europe, this was going on down about where present-day Croatia and the Balkans is. Tiberius was forced to stop that campaign against Marcovidius and recognize him as king so that he could then send his 8 legions, the 8th Augusta, the 15th Apollarius, the 20th Valeria Vitrix, the 21st Rapix, the 13th Gemina, the 14th Gemina, the 16th Galatia, and an unknown unit to crush this rebellion. So all of a sudden, let's shift our army and start marching off to the south. Sounds like a certain World War II commander and dictator who is having problems managing troops around a map. But anyway, nearly half of these Roman legions in existence were sent to the Balkans to end the revolt, which in itself was triggered by constant neglect, endemic food shortages, high taxes, harsh behavior on the part of the Roman tax collectors. This campaign, led by Tiberius and Quaestor Legatus Germanicus under Emperor Augustus, was one of the most difficult and crucial points in the history of the Roman Empire. Due to the massive redeployment of the available legions, when Varus was named Legatus Augusti pro praetari in Germania, he only had 3 legions left to him. Varius' name and deeds were well known beyond the empire because of his ruthlessness and crucifying of insurgents. This just endeared him to insurgents. While he was feared by the people, he was highly respected by the Roman Senate. Now, on the Rhine, he had command of the 17th, 18th, and 19th legions, and these previously had been led by Gaius Sentius Saturnus, who had been sent back to Rome after being awarded the Omenetra Triumphia. The other 2 legions in the winter quarters at the army of Castrum Montiglium were led by Varius' nephew, Lucius Nonius Asperinus, and perhaps Lucius Arrhenius. After his return to Rome, Arminius became a trusted advisor to Varus, but in secret he forged an alliance with the Germanic peoples that had traditionally been enemies. These probably included the Cherusci, Marsi, Chatti, and Bucteri, and these were some of the 50 different Germanic tribes at the time. Using their collective outrage over Varus' tyrannous insolence and wanton cruelty to the conquered, Arminius was able to unite the disorganized groups who had submitted in sullen hatred to Roman dominion and maintain the alliance until the most opportune moment to strike. Ah yes, we love it when they unite for battle.
Battle!
Now, following the transfer of 8 of the 11 legions present to the Balkans, those 3 legions were left to face Germanic tribesmen. This represented the perfect opportunity for Arminius to defeat Varus. Now, while Varus was on his way from his summer camp west of the river Weser to the winter headquarters near the Rhine, he heard reports of a local rebellion, reports that had been fabricated by Arminius. Edward Shepherd Creasy writes that this represented to Varus an occasion in which required prompt attendance on the spot, but he was kept studying ignorance as being part of the concerted national rising, as he still looked on Arminius as his submissive vessel. Play the game, guys, play the game.
I like games.
Varius decided to quell this uprising immediately, expediting his response by taking a detour through territory that was unfamiliar to the Romans. Arminius, who accompanied them, directed him along a route that would facilitate an ambush. Another Cheruscian nobleman, Sigises, brother of Samarius and unwilling father-in-law to Arminius, warned Varus the night before the Roman forces departed, allegedly suggesting Varus should apprehend Arminius, along with other Germanic leaders who he identified as participants in the planned uprising. His warning, however, was dismissed as stemming from a personal feud between Sigises and Arminius. Arminius then left under the pretext of Germanic forces to support the Roman campaign. Once free from the prying eyes, he immediately led his troops in a series of attacks on the surrounding Roman garrisons. Now, interestingly enough, recent archaeological finds place the battle at Calvary's Hill in Osnabrück County, Lower Saxony. On the basis of Roman accounts, the Romans were marching northwest from what is now the city of Detmold, passing east of Osnabrück while camping in the area prior to the attack. Now, Varus's forces, again, contained the 3 legions. I'm not sure why they keep repeating the 3 legions, but the notes go that way. 6 cohorts of artillery troops, non-citizens or allied troops, and 3 squadrons of cavalry. Now, most of these lacked combat experience, both with regard to Germanic fighters and under the prevalent local conditions. Roman forces were not marching in combat formation, and they were interspersed with large numbers of camp followers. So imagine yourselves, you guys have seen some of our videos where we show the Black Hills, the tightly packed trees, a few trails here and there, roads leading in different directions, and you can't see your hand in front of your face. This is kind of like that forest. It's very dense, it's very tightly packed. You're not going to see a lot on either side. Now, go ahead and imagine your forces are marching up said road, and scattered among the men, you got a servant walking here, you got a civilian who might be a scout walking along as well. They're all kind of just moseying along. You know, it's not very military looking. You know, you think of the Roman, legions being a tightly packed, organized bunch. This is anything but. Now, looking at the numbers, and as they entered the forest northeast of Osnabrück, they found the track narrow and muddy. According to Dio Cassius, a violent storm had also arisen. He also writes that Varus neglected to send out reconnaissance parties ahead of the main body of troops. No scouts. We're doing good, class. Now, this line of march was now stretched out perilously long, between 15 to 20 kilometers, or about 9 to 12 miles. So you figure from here all the way out to, say, Black Hawk. That's a long line, very disorganized, with deep woods on both sides of the road, if you could call it a road. It was in this state in which the attack by Germanic warriors, armed with light swords, large lances, and narrow-bladed short spears called frame. The attackers surrounded the entire Roman army and rained down javelins on the intruders. Arminius, recalling his education in Rome, understood the enemy's tactics and was able to direct his troops to counter them effectively by using locally superior numbers against the dispersed Roman legions. Now, the Romans did manage to set up a fortified night camp, and the next morning broke out into the open country north of the Wean Hills near the modern town of Osterkalpen. The breakout was accompanied by heavy losses to the Roman survivors as a further attempt to escape by marching through another forested area as the torrential rains continued. Now, the Romans undertook a night march to escape, but marched into another trap that Arminius had set at the foot of Calvary's Hill. There is a sandy open strip in which the Romans could march, was constricted by the hill, so there's only a gap of about 330 feet between the woods and the swampland at the edge of the Great Bog. The road was further blocked by a trench, and towards the forest, an earthen wall had been built along the roadside, permitting the Germanic alliance to attack the Romans from cover. The Romans made a desperate attempt to storm the wall that failed, and the highest-ranking officer next to Varus, Legatus Numanos of Vala, abandoned his troops by raiding off with the cavalry. Bye, guys. You're on your own.
Bye-bye.
His retreat was in vain, though, however. He was shortly overtaken by the Germanic cavalry and killed shortly thereafter, according to Vasilius Patrilicus. The Germanic warriors then stormed the field, slaughtering the disintegrating Roman forces. Valerius committed suicide, and Villius reports that one commander, Praefectus Salonius, surrendered, then later took his own life, while his colleague, Praefectus Aegius, died leading his doomed troops. Now, Roman casualties have been estimated between 15 and 20,000 dead. That is a massive loss of life. Many of the officers were said to have taken their own lives by falling on their swords of an approved manner. Tactilius wrote that many of the officers were sacrificed by the Germanic forces as part of the indigenous religious ceremonies, cooked in pots, and had their bones used for rituals.
Yum!
Others were ransomed, and some common soldiers appear to have been enslaved. Hey, Mommy, I got a new soldier toy. All Roman accounts stress the completeness of this Roman defeat and the find at Calcrease of 6,000 pieces of Roman equipment, but only a single item that was clearly Germanic, part of a spur, suggests few Germanic losses. However, the victors would most likely have removed the bodies of the fallen, and their practice of burying the warriors' battle gear with them would have also contributed to the lack of Germanic relics. Additionally, as many of several thousand Germanic soldiers were deserting militiamen and wore Roman armor, this thus would have appeared to be Roman in the archaeological digs. It is also known that Germanic peoples wore perishable organic materials such as leather and less metal than the Roman legionnaires. Now, the victory was followed by a clean sweep of the Roman forts, garrisons, and cities, of which there were at least two east of the Rhine. The two Roman Varus nephews, Lucius known as Asprenas, simply tried to hold the Rhine. One fort, Ilsio, most likely located in today's Haltern am Sea, fended off the Germanic alliance for many weeks, perhaps even a few months. After the situation became untenable, the garrison under Lucius Caticus, accompanied by survivors of the Teutoburg Forest, broke through the siege and reached the Rhine. They had resisted long enough for Nonius Asprenas to have organized the Roman defense on the Rhine with 2 legions, and Tiberius had arrived with a new army, together preventing Aurelius from crossing the Rhine and invading Gaul. Now, as the news got back home, things were not happy. On hearing the defeat, Emperor Augustus, according to the Roman historian Sidonius, in the 12 Caesars, was so shaken that he stood butting his head against the walls of the palace, repeatedly shouting, "Quintus Varus, give me back my legions!" The legion numbers 17, 18, and 19 were not used again by the Romans. They basically did not want to have any mention of these legions. They were such a horrible destruction. This is in contrast to other legions that had been reestablished after suffering defeat. Battle abruptly ended the period of triumphant Roman expansion that followed the end of the civil wars 40 years earlier. And Augustus' stepson Tiberius took effective control and prepared for the continuation of the war. The 20th Valeria Victrix and the 13th Jovita were sent to the Rhine to replace these lost legions. Arminius sent Varus's severed head to Marbodius, king of the Macromani, and other most powerful Germanic ruler, with an offer of an anti-Roman alliance. Marbodius declined, ceding the head to Rome for burial, and decided to remain neutral throughout the ensuing war. Only thereafter did a brief, inconclusive war break out between the two Germanic leaders. But that is what the Battle of the Forest was like. Basically, after that, there were a few extra attempts by the Romans. They classified it as retaliation, and they were able to get 2 of the eagle staffs back in open combat, fighting back with a fellow named Germanicus, who was a nephew of Tiberius. But primarily, that one battle changed the whole scope of how Rome saw Northern Europe. Any campaign that's going to be very costly, both in terms of men, but also the entire idea that they were going to be able to conquer and then establish their own little vassal states. That idea pretty much went out the window. But this all the way played back to, by 15 AD, a force invaded the Marsi a second time with about 30,000 men, causing great havoc, while Germanicus' troops had built a fort on Mount Taunus, where he marched with another 30 to 35,000 men against the Chatti. A lot of these forces would play a game of, we'll battle here, we'll fall back, get into some better positions. In a skirmish in the summer of 15 AD, and they captured Arminius' wife Thusnelda, the army visited the site of the first battle. And according to Tacitus, they found heaps of bleached bones and severed skulls nailed to trees, in which they buried, looking on as all kinsfolk into their own blood, at a location Tacitus called Pontus Longi, long causeways. In boggy lowlands somewhere near the Ems, Arminius' troops attacked these Romans. Now, initially, Arminius caught the Germanicus cavalry in a trap, inflicting minor casualties, but the Roman infantry reinforced the rout and checked them. Fighting lasting for 2 days with neither side achieving the decisive victory, Germanicus' forces withdrew and went back to the Rhine. Now, a second attack came along under Germanicus in AD 16, forcing the crossing of the Weser near the modern Minden, suffered some losses to a Germanic skirmishing force, and forced Arminius' army to stand in open battle at Istovado in the Battle of the Weser River. Germanicus' legions suffered huge casualties on the Germanic armies while sustaining only minor losses, and a final battle was fought at the Angevarian Wall west of modern Hanover, repeating the pattern of high Germanic fatalities, which forced them to flee beyond the Elbe. Germanicus, having defeated forces between the Rhine and the Elbe, then ordered Caius Silius to march against the Ashadi with a mixed force of 3,000 cavalry and 30,000 infantry. While Germanicus, with a larger army, invaded the Marsi for the third time, devastating the land, encountering no resistance. Now, with the main objectives reached and winter approaching, Germanicus ordered his army back to the winter camps, with the fleet incurring some damage from a storm at the Northern Sea. After a few more raids across the Rhine, which resulted in the recovery of 2 of those Legion's eagles lost in the 9 AD, 1 eagle was recovered from the Marsi in 14 AD. The other Legion, 19, was recovered from Versteri in AD 15, so they lost those for 6 years. Tiberius then ordered the Roman forces to halt and withdrew across the Rhine, and effectively the Rhine was kind of given the idea that that's where the new boundary would be set. Tiberius would be given the triumph and then reassigned to a new command. But thanks for the suggestion on the interesting battle in history. If anybody else has any further suggestions or ideas, I'm always open to studying. These were kind of... But again, this is Joe, the bearded historian, with another Wednesday Fun Time.